What's your most NSFW family moment? I skipped school. I used to do it all the time because my dad worked 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. most days and was a single father. I was in my room as per norm and he came home early. Didn't want to get caught, so stayed perfectly still. My bedroom's at the top of the stairs, so the computer is right at the base of the stairs. Dad watches adult videos for the next hour. I think he heard a squeak because he stopped to holler up the stairs for me but didn't budge, didn't move, didn't say anything, just waited. 5 minutes pass, he's satisfied, goes back to his business. Never told him, never skipped school again. Story 2. When I was 14 or so, one of my cousins from my mom's side of the family came with us to my grandparents' dad's side of the family for Christmas Day. We were staying there the night with my entire extended family, which is a nightmare in itself. My dad's brother, after drinking all day and after finding out my cousin and I will be sharing a bed in the back of the 4WD, comes up to me and says really slyly, "You and your little girlfriend are sharing a bed, huh?" I inform him that she is my cousin, and he just looks blankly at me and says, "That's okay, my first time was with my cousin." I hadn't mentioned this to anyone because it was weird and made me a little uncomfortable, but my cousin got married 2 weeks ago. At the reception, I told my dad about what his brother had said to me some 15 years ago. My dad just looked at me and says, "Yeah, we both had our first times with Shelly. My family is a bunch of cousin bangers. Ugh." Edit 1. For everyone asking, my mom's name is Michelle. She gets called Shelly by family friend's kid. It's awkward for me now. My dad grew up in a small village of around 40 people, 13 of which were his parents and siblings. If the choice is bang your cousin or bang your sister, probably choose cousin, or neither. I personally choose neither. We're in Australia, not the hillbilly redneck woods of the US, just FYI. Shelly is around 65 now. She's a couple of years older than my old boy. My grandma told me one year at Christmas that Shelly had a couple of abortions back in the late 60s, early 70s, and she has ruined a handful of marriages. She's never married or had kids. She lives in a retirement village now and has told me on more than one occasion that she bones all the widowers in the retirement village. She's a crass, abrasive old crone who bangs. Good for her, I guess. Edit 2. Everyone asking if I've ever met my Aunt Shelley or calling her an AILF, do you understand how familial relationships work? My dad's cousin is not my aunt. She's my second cousin, first cousin once removed. Story 3. When I was 18, I dated a girl. She lived about an hour away, so I would stay at her house overnight, but her parents wouldn't let us stay in the same room, so I slept in a guest bed in the basement. Being 18-year-olds, we would be up very late and go to bed around 2 a.m. He came down to the basement every single morning before work and jerked it to adult videos on the desktop computer while I was sleeping 10 feet away. There was only a couch between us, so the first couple times I lifted my head to see what he was doing before I realized. You better believe I didn't keep it a secret from her. I'd quietly text her from under the blanket, "Your dad's jerking again," right next to me. Story 4. When I was still in school, I came home with my GF at the time. We're upstairs in my room and she's giving me head. Across the room, I see the door start to slowly and ridiculously silently open. In walks my father. Sees me, sees her, most awkward eye contact ever. In a panic, I do the only thing I could think of. I point him out the door. Just as quietly as he came in, he was gone again. And on that day, he earned my eternal respect. She still doesn't know. Story 5. I was helping my then boyfriend's sister move into a new place, and the keys were at the new house, and someone needed to go get them. So my boyfriend and I drove over to get them. While we were there, we did a little exploring of the new empty house. We realized there was an attic and opened the ceiling door to let the steps down. I climbed up first and, being in a skirt, gave my boyfriend a nice view. We ended up hooking up right there on the attic ladder, and right in the middle, we hear the door open. Boyfriend's name gets called out, a pause, and then the door shut. We sheepishly return to the rest of the family at the old house to find his sister trying not to laugh hysterically. She says their mother came over to try and find out what was taking so long. Upon her return, she just loudly exclaimed, "They were banging!" To this day, it's our favorite phrase to exclaim. Story 6. I was on a road trip with my parents and the family dog after my brother went to college, and we checked into a hotel room with 2 queen beds. My parents took one, the dog and I were in the other. My dad wanted to gross me out and said, "Now son, if you hear anything in the middle of the night, keep your eyes on that wall," and pointed behind me with one hand, putting his arm around my disgusted mom with the other. I put my arm around the dog and said, "Okay, but I expect the same courtesy." Story 7. Back when I was in high school, I worked with my girlfriend on weekends. After work, we'd go back to her house and usually had 2-ish hours before her parents came home. On some days, we'd take a nap, other days, we'd watch a movie or fool around, etc. One fateful Saturday, our nap session turned into banging. As an aside, she was pretty loud, especially when she thought no one was home. So we get started and everything is coming along nicely when all of a sudden there's some aggressive banging on her bedroom door. Of course, we freak out, get dressed, and open the door only to find out it was her sister's boyfriend messing with us. So we shut the door and get back to business in a much more aggressive manner than initially. Her moaning is now more like yelling, and I'm humping her with reckless abandon when again there's another round of banging on the door. This time we ignore it and keep going for another 10-ish seconds before we hear her dad scream at us through the door. He drove me home in his police cruiser immediately after that. 45-ish minutes in silence with his shotgun in the backseat and a condom still on me. Story 9. There was a time when my family lived in a tiny apartment. We had one bedroom with a double-deck bed. My parents slept on the bottom bunk and my older sister and I slept on the top. Well, one night I wake up to my bed shaking and peeking below I realized my parents were banging. I was like maybe 8 or 9, so I wasn't really grossed out, but just really confused. My sister slept through the entire thing, or so I've always thought. Story 10. My husband and I had to move in with his parents for about 3 months when we were having financial issues. As I have the very last bag in my hand ready to move to our new home, I sat the bag on the living room floor and went to the bathroom. When I came out, something was going off in the bag. I said, "It's probably our son's Thomas the Tank toy." My mom-in-law dives right in and pulls out my vibrator and holds it up for like 30 seconds like she's the Statue of Liberty holding up her torch. My father-in-law and brother-in-law were also right there in the room. Needless to say, they still bring it up, and Thomas the Train is now code for vibrator in that family. Story 11. Growing up, my brother and I used to share a room. Anyway, one night I get woken up by moaning and sounds of pain. I look over and my brother rolls out of bed, clutching his stomach, and runs out of a room. Now, imagine a chubby 9-year-old wearing nothing but loose boxers hobbling/sprinting down the hall. I'm hit with this foul smell, and I look down and there is a trail of crap everywhere. Brother finishes running, slams into the bedroom, and you can almost hear the sigh of relief. Except there wasn't. Turns out, when he went to relieve his bowels, he had nothing left. Best part was that he didn't even realize where it had gone until he walked out the bathroom to see his legacy spread out behind him. Oh, and fun fact, we had extended family staying over at that time, notably the hot cousin he was crushing on. Story 12. When I was a kid, around 8 years old, the PlayStation was in my parents' room, and we usually went to that room to play Gran Turismo with my little brother, which essentially consisted of driving a Suzuki Escudo at full throttle, never hitting the brakes once for the duration of the race, and still winning one lap ahead from everybody. Once he got angry about something and threw his controller away, detaching it from the console, and it ended up landing on my parents' wardrobe. We were small, so we tried climbing on the thing to get it, and ended up making a lot of the stuff on there fall on us. I felt a soft object hitting my forehead. It looked like a really big dong. My brother took it from the ground, wondering what that was. I took it from him, and yes, it was definitely what I thought it was. Innocent me back then thought it had something to do with a mannequin or something because I had never seen a mannequin naked and figured that they had them too. For some reason, I instinctively threw it back up the wardrobe, but my little bro had already dashed downstairs telling my parents we found something strange in their bedroom. So my parents dashed upstairs and asked me what it was. I told them we found something that looked like a plastic horse dong and threw it back up. Since then, we've had the PlayStation in our room. Story 13. My mom chased my teenage brothers around the house inside and out with a dildo once. I had the chance to ask my brother about it later. He was pissed about it at the time, but I was like 6, and my mom was laughing so much, so I thought everyone was having a good time. Looking back at it, I can see why he was pissed. Mom's dildo, ew, and why she thought it was so funny? Good memories. Story 14. I was back in town to see my family, and I met up with my dad and my stepmom. They were out drinking with some of our closest family friends. Well, after about an hour or so, they were getting pretty drunk and rowdy. I noticed the women, including my stepmom, start getting real flirtatious with each other. Mind you, there are 5 couples, including my parents, at this gathering. I watch it continue, and I have to admit I'm a little uncomfortable seeing all these people I grew up around being overly public and in general. After a while, I finally said, "What the frick is going on here?" to my parents. My stepmom started laughing and replied drunkenly with, "To be honest, you're the only one in this room I haven't banged." Needless to say, I left pretty quick after that. Story 15. I was at my first real girlfriend's house when I was in high school. We would bang in the basement, finished basement, when her family was home to avoid any walk-ins. After I finished, it was common practice to tie the condom in a knot and avoid throwing it in the trash bin to avoid the mom finding it when she was cleaning. So I left it on top of the ping pong table thinking I could take it upstairs with me when we decided to leave. It was right next to the couch. Well, I screwed up. Her father and little brother thought it was a good time to go downstairs and play ping pong. The brother gets to the table first, sees the used rubber, picks it up, the load just dangling there, holds it out, turns to the father and says, "Dad, what is this?" The dad's face was of sheer terror as he screamed at his son to drop it. He grabbed his wrist and stomped upstairs, all the while not breaking eye contact with me. I guess that instilled a fear of birth control into the poor girl. She got knocked up in college by a man her dad's age. Oof. Story 16. My uncle's new wife was meeting the family for the first time, and after a glass of wine, she asks if she can be herself. Everyone said yes. Then she asked my then 71-year-old grandpa if he sat at home watching adult videos and jerking off all day. Edit. This was our first time having her at a family function. We met her in passing at their wedding. I know, it's weird. So no one really knew anything about her. We found out sometime later she had started a brawl at her own wedding after we had left, and my family is no longer welcome at American Legion. Story 17. Had a GF over. We did the nasty. I threw the used condom into the trash. Took her home, then came home to my mom and sister laughing their asses off. Turns out our dog ran up to my room, grabbed it out of the trash, and was playing with it while I had gone, and they found it. Story 18. I was having trouble with my radiator and had no toolbox, so I asked my dad if I could borrow his. He came over and said he'd fix it for me. I hadn't had time to clean since he only lives about 2 minutes away, so he started reading me my rights about how messy my house is, etc., etc. As he was lamenting over my clothes being on the floor, he opened my wardrobe to demonstrate how much room I had. In my wardrobe, there is a box. My dad looked down at the box. The box was open. The box was filled with fetish gear and toys. My dad closed the wardrobe and fixed my radiator. Story 19. Oh god, this is very similar to a moment that still has me cringing. I was moving and my parents decided to help me move. My girlfriend and I have a fetish box as well. Strap-on, pumps, rope, you know, that kind of stuff. Well, my GF, bless her heart, thought it would be funny and stealthily to label the box books, but the two O's having eyes like boobs. Yeah, we were mature. Anyway, I'm in the new place unpacking boxes and my dad walks in with the books box. He says my name and says, "This box is really light for books. Let me make sure you've got the right box here." No, I know what's in there. It's He cuts the box open and it's all there. I'm positive the stench of so many fluids have just invaded his nostrils. He just stares for like 20 seconds, taking it all in. At this point, I've gone past being ashamed. I'm ready for him to berate my desires. He closes the box and just walks away, which felt more like I'm just disappointed more than anything. About 20 minutes goes by and he comes back in and just asks me, no warm-up, "Why do you need another dong?" Well, it feels good. At that moment, I realized my father, a rigid military right wing, had no idea what a strap-on was. And boy, did that open up a can of frickin' worms. Story 20. I was house sitting for my grandparents many moons ago, and I had to get a fresh sheet. When I lifted the first one, lo and behold, there was my grandmother's vibrator. Ugh, kept that secret for years. When I eventually told my mom about it, her only reaction was, "Your grandfather is impotent." I was weirded out, but now I just laugh about it. Edit. There seems to be some confusion about the impotency, and obviously my grandfather wasn't always impotent, it happened with age. On a different and not entirely unrelated note, he is not my biological grandfather, so he could be my grandfather regardless. Story 21. I got a cramp in that spot of muscle under the lower jaw, the one directly under my tongue, while I was going down on my GF. I stopped and fell on the floor trying to massage the muscle to relax because it hurt like hell. My GF was super pissed because she was seconds away from finishing, but she saw me and tried to help me. So we're both there in the living room in my apartment, half naked, then I see the front door open. My parents, younger brother, and a few of my teenage cousins started walking in. It was a surprise visit, and they just decided to let themselves in without even knocking. My dad was the first in, and the sight of my GF's butt was there to greet him. I don't think I should continue this. I think you get the picture. Story 22. One Thanksgiving, many years ago, my mom got the bright idea that before eating, we would go around the table and everyone would share what they were thankful for. My dad told her repeatedly that he wasn't doing that and that was a bad idea, but she insisted. So we're sitting there at the table waiting to see what happens. My whole family was in attendance. Brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins, and my grandmother. My dad volunteers to go first, and the look on my mom's face is one where she's trying to decide if she should be worried about what he's going to say, mixed with wondering if he just decided to play along. My dad says, "I'm thankful I'm 50 years old and I can still get rock hard." Half the table died laughing. Half the table was uncomfortable. My mom was pissed, and my dad got exactly what he wanted and stopped that whole process in its tracks. Then it was dinner time. Story 23. My mom gave me a kidney, and during our recovery, she really wanted to see me, but the hospital wouldn't let her because she had a complication from the surgery and was pretty out of it. But somehow she managed to slip out of her room and come find me. Mind you, I was on a completely opposite floor from her, so I don't know how the frick she found me. But anyway, it was my first official day eating solid food, so I was pretty excited until she got there. While I was eating, here comes my mom into the room, and for some reason she decided it was the perfect time to undress. I mean, full frontal view of my mother and all, and she goes, "Michael, look at what they did to me. Look at these scars." Needless to say, I will never eat Fruit Loops again and not be reminded of that. Story 24. After dating my ex-girlfriend for a few months some years back, I was to go over their house for Christmas Eve and spend the night to open up presents and have breakfast on Christmas morning. Me having my first real adult GF made this incredibly nerve-wracking. I should also mention that I had a kidney transplant about 4 months prior as well. So we get there around noon to start making spaghetti for everyone that night. I'm fine with having a task like this, as it allows me to focus on something other than my nerves. Once my part in that was over, I decided to nervous drink, and I nervous drank a lot. Since I had a transplant recently, my tolerance was garbage. Party was fun, made friends, had laughs, but unfortunately, I blacked out towards the end of the party. Her sister said she saw me in the dad's office laughing hysterically at the paper shredder, laying in the hallway, singing show tunes, and running around the front of their house without my shirt or shoes on, in December, in the north. The worst moment was after everyone passed out, I was still up and moving around. The next thing I knew, I was being woken up by my GF yelling at me on Christmas morning. "Did you crap in the hallway last night?" she asks, and I reply with the only answer I can come up with, which is, no. She goes, "I bet you frickin' did." So she goes into full detective mode and pulls my pants down and looks at my butt, and yeah, I did. TLDR, stayed at my GF parents' house for Christmas, and their family woke up to 2 turds in their hallway and 2 turds in their toilet. Whoops. Story 25. When I was a lot younger, I'm 29 now, my parents had some people over, including my one aunt and uncle who are incredibly straight-laced. Early on in the evening, in one of the family rooms, she put on a VHS tape to watch of a movie she remembered seeing back during a trip she took with my uncle years ago. Nothing was really happening with the get-together as of yet since it was still really early in the evening, so some of us stuck around to see what movie it was before more people came. Within the first 5 minutes, there were more topless girls and nudity in it than your average Skinamax flick nowadays. My aunt is absolutely mortified at this point and says she doesn't remember any of this in the movie, while my mom, her sister, is laughing hysterically. She grabs the remote from her and says she should keep it on just because what's going on is so ridiculous, and my aunt's reaction is just so funny. I think my mom's exact words were, "How the hell could you not remember any of this? There's so many tits on the screen, I can't even see the plot." Everyone in the room is dying that she brought over what was essentially a softcore 80s sexploitation movie with the subplot of there being some skiing thrown in there sporadically. My dad walks in since he hears everyone laughing, and he's just got the biggest WTF face on when he sees what's up. Makes an about face back towards the kitchen and pours himself a drink. Story 27. When I was around 13, I was in bed awake on the couch in our mobile home. Main bed went to my mother, and 2 single beds in one room went to my sisters. My cousin and her fiance were staying with us that night on the only other bed, which was the table converted into a bed in the sitting room slash kitchen room I was in. When they got home from being out on the town, I pretended to be asleep. I heard them start looking around for something and saying they couldn't find it and were sounding very disappointed. I jokingly thought to myself, aw, they're mad because they can't find a condom. 5 minutes later, they find what they were looking for. 2 minutes later, they're banging about 3 feet away from me. At one point, I got a dead arm and had to adjust myself. I gave them both a heart attack, but they didn't know I was still awake.